Good morning or afternoon, Year 10, depending on when you're listening to this and sitting down to do all your English work. I hope everybody had a fantastic half term and just kind of chilled out and didn't worry too much about their work. I know that's what I did. And we're pretty lucky because the weather was nicer last week as well. Hold on, bear with me for some reason. It won't go into SkyChat. Here we go. Now we're up and rolling. Okay, so we looked at Act 2. I haven't reviewed Act 1 because I know everybody did Act 1 in quite a lot of detail last year. So I figured we were kind of safe leaving that if we kind of needed to. So we reviewed a key scene in Act 2. We reviewed a key scene in Act 3. Now I want us to review a key scene in Act 4. Next week we will review a couple of bits from Act 5, and then that will be the end of our Macbeth section, and we will move on to everybody's favourite, which is a bit of poetry. So today I want you to write down the date, Thursday the 3rd of June 2020, and your title is Equivocation, Act 4, Scene 1. I've kind of shortened that in a way I've done it because I've done it 4.1. If you want to do it that way rather than write the act of the scene, that's fine, as long as you understand what 4.1 stands for. Remember, you need to underline with a ruler. Just because you're at home doesn't mean you don't still have to present your work beautifully, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide, but if you need the title up for longer, just press pause. So, earlier on in the play, you should remember this. Banquo comments on the Weird Sisters, aka the witches. He calls them the instruments of darkness, tell us truths, win us with honest trifles to betray us in deepest consequence. So, I want you to think about a couple of points here. Okay, I want everybody to answer the question number 1, the first one. What do you think Banquo is warning Macbeth of here? This is said by Banquo in Act 1, all the way back then, Act 1, Scene 3. Then I want everyone from my yellows onward to answer the next question. So what might he be saying about the witches? What is the underlying sense that we have, that Banquo has of the witches? There's a couple of different aspects you're going to want to bring here. There's 3 easy points you can make, but I want you to make at least 2 different ideas of what, looking at that crow, Banquo is saying and implying about the witches. And then my purples, your challenge, how might Banquo's warning align with King James' beliefs? So remember, we've got to keep thinking about that context. What was happening in the world when Shakespeare was writing this? Who commissioned him to write a play? Who did he know was going to be in the audience for the first performance? And what impact may that person's views and belief have on the play? And how do we see those, that idea kind of sewn into the fabric of the play? Again, if you need these questions here longer, please press pause. I want you to write the question and write the answer for me, so it's really clear for you to see when you go back through and do your revision, and for whenever I get to actually see your books again, I can follow exactly what you're talking about in your answers. Now, I think the majority of you that were in my normal classes will have heard me use this term, equivocation. You should have it, if memory serves me correctly, in your vocabulary banks. If you don't, add it now. Write down equivocation, look up the meaning of the word. Okay. If you weren't in my class and you didn't come across equivocation, you're going to kind of cover it now. And for everybody that was in my classes, we're going to kind of revise and look at it in a bit more detail. So, just after he has been named Thane of Cawdor, Macbeth wonders if he can believe the rest of the witch's prophecies. And Banquo remarks, oftentimes, to win us to our harm, the instruments of darkness tell us truths, win us with honest trifles, to betray in deepest consequence. That quote that we were just looking at earlier. So here, Banquo is warning Macbeth that the witches could lure him to great evil by telling him small truths. Even though Banquo doesn't use the word equivocation, it's what he's talking about. Is this an example of equivocation? What might... Oh, sorry, I didn't read that properly. If this is an example of equivocation, what might equivocation be? So, can you work out what equivocation is from that? If not, then look it up. Okay, you've all got access to either a paperback dictionary at home or online dictionaries. Okay, have a look at how you would define and explain equivocation. Okay, so equivocation is the use of ambiguous language to conceal the truth or to avoid committing oneself. A statement that lends itself to multiple interpretations. My purples, I want you to challenge how might equivocation be different from a paradox. I want you to pause and I want you to think about and I want you to write down an explanation of how you think there's a difference between equivocation and paradox. Now, we're going to look at paradox. If you weren't in my purples group, so you weren't having to pause and think about that and do that first, pause now and look up the definition of a paradox, okay? So a statement that seems to be contradictory, but that might be true when considered from a particular perspective. See if you can find a different definition to that to give you a really clear idea of what it is. So I've got 3 examples of paradoxes at the bottom. You can see the numbered 1, 2 and 3, and they're all from Act 1. Reds, okay, identify the speaker and the addressee and explain as much as you can about the context of the situation, okay. Explain the specific terms of the quotation that make it a paradox. Now, I want yellows and everybody else, everybody above yellow, to do that task. So reds, you're just doing the first one, okay. Yellows, you're not doing the first one, you're starting on the yellow, okay. Greens and purples, you're doing the yellow, you're starting there, and then you're going to go on to do the other one of your learner colour as well. And then greens, you're after you've done the yellow task, you're going to explain the hidden truth to be found in the paradox. And purples, you are going to explain why Shakespeare presented this paradox. What themes could they link to, and what effect do you think these lines create? Pause it here. Get on with that task. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Now, equivocation. As we've already looked at, it's a statement that lends itself to multiple interpretations. I've got 2 equivocations examples, one from Act 2, one from Act 3. Reds, I want you to identify the speaker and addressee and explain as much as you can about the context of each situation. Yellows, I want you to explain the specific terms in the quotation that make it an equivocation. Greens and purples, you don't need to do the yellow this time, but I do want both green and purple to do the green task. I don't have a separate one for purples on this one. So I want you to explain the deceptive truth that is to be found in the equivocation. Okay, so it's quite a challenging one. You might need to read it a couple of times to really think about what is the deceptive truth. Where can we see that deceptive truth in the equivocation of these lines? So you're going to need to pause this here while you do that task. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Okay, this is where you're going to need your pencils and your rulers. Okay, you're going to write out a table. Now, I think you're going to need at least a whole page. I would probably say that doing the table kind of landscape way will probably be your best use of space. So, unless you've only used a few lines at the top of your page for your last answers, go on to a new page because you will need the whole page for this. So, you need 1, 2, 3, 4 columns along and 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 columns down, okay? So what you need to do, and what you've seen in your Go for Schools is part of your work this week, is to read all of Act 4, but predominantly what I most want you to focus on is reading Act 4, Scene 1. And that's what you need to do to fill in this table. So you need to make sure that before you complete this table, you've reread Act 4, Scene 1. Okay, remember, if you don't have your own text, there was a link given in the first, I believe, uploaded piece of homeschooling with a link to an online PDF version of Macbeth. If you can't find that link, if you just go on and Google search, you should be able to find quite a few different options for online versions of Macbeth. So I want you to draw this table as you can see it, okay? Because what we're going to do is we're going to look at in more detail the witches' apparitions, because they are examples of equivocation. You need to hunt these down, explain their meaning and how each is ambiguous. We really need to make sure that we're confident on and really can break down and understand the trickery, the manipulation, the cunning of the witches. And equivocation is kind of the way that they do that. So I want you to pause it here while you draw out that table. You might not want to do the lines in between the first, second and third just yet, so that you're not sure how much you're going to need to write in each box. Or you might need to give yourself you are going to write a reasonable amount in each of these boxes, so do give yourself a decent amount of space if you do want to draw all the lines in straight away. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide, so if you're not ready for that, please press pause. So, here, because I'm a very kind, generous and caring teacher, I have given you an example for the first one. Okay, I've done the first one for you. And that should help you and guide you through what you need to do for the second apparition and the third apparition. But bear in mind, I do expect you to use this level of detail for those two. So, column number 1. What is the apparition? What does it tell Macbeth? So, the apparition is an armoured head. And it says, beware Macduff, beware Thane of Fife. Now, column 2. What makes it an equivocation? Now, Macbeth takes this at face value and only thinks about what the witches have said and not what they've shown him. The witches don't tell Macbeth what about Macduff he needs to be aware of. That's where that kind of equivocation comes in. The surface meaning of the armoured head is obvious. Macduff will come to fight against Macbeth. The second meaning doesn't become clear, equivocation, until the end of the play when Macduff beheads Macbeth, because obviously, leading into the second things he's told, it turns out that Macduff was born by caesarean, so that's why Macbeth should have been wary of him and not what Macbeth assumes is the reason. So, column number 3. Deceptive truth, effect on Macbeth and Shakespeare's purpose. So, Macbeth had already feared that Macduff had figured out he'd murdered Duncan. Macbeth's suspicions have been confirmed through beware Macduff. He considers that confirmation. This gives him a false sense of security. Shakespeare deliberately has the witches mislead Macbeth too. What might he be doing that for? To reinforce what? Think about what our earlier question was, purples, in line with how does this presentation of the witches fit in with King James I's perspective on witches? What might his purpose be in doing this? Think about what people thought of and considered the supernatural to be, who he's writing this play for, and finish that idea, that point that I've started. You can see where I've got my ellipsis showing that I want you to continue on with that point. So you're probably going to need to pause this now for a little while, because doing the second and third apparition will take you a little while. I'm going to move on to the next slide, but you should pause. So, my boxes have gone wonky. Okay, so here is a lovely little mini essay question for you. Okay, I want you to write down the question that's in the white and yellow at the top of my slide. Explore how Shakespeare presents Macbeth as a confident character. Now, both can be argued about Macbeth. We could look at evidence to identify him as confident, We could also look at evidence to identify him as incredibly lacking confidence and afraid and confused and uncertain. But there's definitely examples and ways to explore his confidence as a character. Now, you don't have to, in order to answer this question, say that he is strongly or completely or consistently presented as confident. You can answer this question by exploring how Shakespeare has Macbeth go from being confident to insecure and uncertain, and look at how many times we see that shift, that change in Macbeth. How many times do we see him confident versus how many times do we see him undecided and unsure and anxious and afraid? So, challenge. This is my purples. I really want you to try and make sure you build this in. Greens, if you can, that would be fab. So, challenge. Could you reference how this meeting with the witches is similar or dissimilar to Macbeth's first meeting in Act 1, Scene 3? What might Shakespeare be suggesting through this interaction? So think about it through the interaction of Macbeth in Act 4, Scene 1 with the witches, but also think about what might Shakespeare's purpose be with the similarities or dissimilarities between those two encounters with the witches. Okay. Keywords, I want everybody to use these words at some point in their answer. Ambiguous, fool, ambition, control, fate, foreshadow, irony. These are all key words to consistently use when analysing, exploring, discussing Macbeth. Okay? So, reds and yellows, I would like 2 paragraphs on this. Greens and purples, I would like at least 3 paragraphs. Okay, and purples, I want at least one of those paragraphs to be looking at the similarities or what's dissimilar between his first encounter and his second encounter with the witches. Now remember, all of this is practice for that joy that is your GCSE this time next year. And that mark scheme breaks down into our AO1, our AO2 and our AO3. So AO1, you must use relevant quotes from the extract. The extract that we're using for this question is Act 4, Scene 1. Only the sections that is Macbeth with the witches. Okay? But you're not going to get above middle of band 3 unless you use quotes from the whole text. So you need to reference other scenes as well. Okay, so if you're looking at Macbeth as a confident character, paragraph 1 should be on how do we or do we not see Macbeth as a confident character in this exchange and meeting with the witches. Paragraph 2 should be where we see him as a confident or unconfident character somewhere else in the play. Okay, paragraph 3, you might want to look at a different take on one of those scenes. If you've looked at him as confident with the witches, you might then want to argue against and look at where do we see a lack of confidence with the witches. You might want to look at the contrast in his confidence between the first time he meets the witches and the second time he's meeting the witches. Or you might want to look at a completely new scene where, again, if you've looked at your first 2 paragraphs have been looking at Macbeth as confident, your third one will be a different scene where we see him lacking confidence. AO2, okay, this is the bit where people lose easy marks. We want sophisticated terminology, okay? That means referencing themes, referencing techniques, talking about the fact, the devices that Shakespeare's trying to employ. Then you also have to give me explained analysis of relevant quotes. What I mean by that is that zooming in. All of that practice that we do with exploding our quotes and zooming in and picking out the connotation of keywords, the tone, the symbolism, okay, the parts of speech. All of that is that explained analysis. What are they What impact do they have? Why is Shakespeare using them? And you have to link that back to effect on the audience. You will not get a developed AO2 mark without exploring effects on the audience, okay? And what I would like my greens and purples to do is explore alternate interpretations of those quotes as well, because that will really help to develop, okay, that analysis of AO2. AO3, contextual links. How can we link this to the environment in which Shakespeare was writing? How can we link this to the reasons in which Shakespeare was writing for and the audience he was writing for? And literally the location and the type of people in that audience in the Globe Theatre, or even in the, what was it, the Black Swan Theatre. Think about his overall messages across the play. What are the key messages? What are the key themes Shakespeare is presenting in this play? And how does this scene, how does Macbeth in this moment, how do these quotes connect to those themes? How is Shakespeare presenting those themes and those overall ideas and messages through this extract, through the quotes that you've chosen for your analysis? Now, if you're struggling where to kind of get started with this, I'm going to go on to my next slide, which gives you a kind of a brief little example of the kind of thing that you could write. So, think about whether or not you like this response. What has this response done well? What is this response lacking? I'm going to read it out to you, and I want you to think about where has this response met those AOs, the AO1, the AO2, and the AO3. Because you need to, in every paragraph, you have to make sure that you've hit AO1, you've hit AO2, and you've hit AO3. Because you want to be getting a mark for each of those sections in every paragraph. Okay? And then, where might you be able to add and develop this, push it up a level, upgrade it by exploring equivocation? Where could equivocation be developed into this answer? And that'll give you some ideas about how and why you might put it into your own answer. And then could this answer have any more relevant context included? Okay, and if so, what relevant context? How could it be included? How might you build that into your own answer? So, here's my sample. In this scene, we see Macbeth is not the brave and settled warrior he once was, which is ironic. Here, the irony is the prophecies are double-edged and turn against Macbeth. The second apparition tells Macbeth that none of woman born shall harm Macbeth, which builds a false sense of confidence to Macbeth. However, as we later, Macduff was ripped, I've missed a word there, sorry. As we later learn, Macduff was ripped from his mother's womb, untimely ripped. Banquo's earlier comment accurately reflects the truth. The instruments of darkness tell us truth, win us with honest trifles to betray us in deepest consequence. These words are prophetic and a condemnation of all that Macbeth comes to believe. Shakespeare has Banquo return once more in this scene with his 8 heirs to mock the stability of Macbeth's throne. Now, this answer does some good things. We've got some of our quotes embedded, okay, where we talk about Macbeth is not the brave and settled. Straight away, we've got embedded quotes from earlier on in the play. Therefore, we're getting some whole text quotes. So that's good, and they're embedded, which up-levels at some of our AO1. Okay. How much of this answer really develops a response to how well Shakespeare's presenting Macbeth as confident? This answer touches on it, okay, which builds a false sense of confidence to Macbeth. Okay, we're told that. The fact that we're told he's not brave and settled also implies that he's not as confident in this scene. So that the question is touched on, but it's not developed in its response. You would not get a high mark in terms of how clearly and precisely you have answered that question from an AO1 perspective here. Okay. Now, we've got a good range of quotes. we've definitely got a good amount of quotes, so that's good. There's a clear understanding of the plot. So we've got the sense that the person answering this question understands the text well. But could it be argued that a couple of our quotes are too long? I think it could. Has this person zoomed in and really developed and analysed in detail any of the language that Shakespeare's used? No, not really. Has this person really linked to the effects on the audience? Have they talked about that? Has this person used sophisticated terminology? Well, we've got irony, talking about something being double-edged, okay. The use of the fact that these words are prophetic, that's quite good. But we've not really got a lot of that analysis of Shakespeare's technique. Okay, what techniques does he use? Why does he use it? How does that technique help to develop that sense of Macbeth as a confident or unconfident character? Okay, and how much context do we see in this? What's clearly missing? Okay, so there's certain things that this answer's done well, but there's a lot of ways to improve it. Okay, but if you want to take or steal a couple of little ideas or some of the key quotes from this to help you and develop what you're doing, please feel free. But remember, this is a long way from a perfect answer. Okay, it's got some good qualities, but think back about what I was saying. Think about what needs to be added and built into it. How could you add that? How could you build that into your own answer? And then I will end this by going back to this slide, which gives you the question, the keywords, and a reminder of those AOs that you need to be hitting. Okay. The only part of the task that I need you to send to me is the answer to this question. Okay. If you want to send me the other work for me to have a quick look and just message you if you've got anything a little bit wrong, that's fine. I'm happy to. But the bit that I want to kind of properly mark is this question. And I only got very, very few responses to the last Macbeth essay, which is why I haven't marked and sent those back yet, because I wanted to try and get a few more. So if you realise that you've done that essay and either you were just working a little bit behind and you've only just completed it, that's fine. Send it to me now. If you've done it but you realise you forgot to email it to me, or you go and check and you realise now that you haven't emailed it to me, please do. I will then wait until I've got these ones through as well, and then I will mark them all together. If I've got enough, I'll do it as a whole class feedback. If I've still got quite low numbers, then I'll mark them individually and send them back to you. Okay. If you've got any questions on this, please email me, message me on Teams. Don't forget that I've got some Teams Q&As with you. Trying to remember off the top of my head, I think class A3, I believe it's our Teams Q&A is a Monday, period 5, and then A5 and B2, our Teams Q&A is period 2 on a Tuesday. Okay, so I'm not going to call the class or anything like that, because I know full well that it would be unrealistic to expect all of you to be logged on then. But if any of you are struggling, if you've got any questions with anything, feel free to either ping me a message on Teams on the chat at that point, and I can send you a message straight back. If you want to audio call me, so that you can directly ask me a question and I can answer it to you over like the Teams version of the telephone, then please do that. Or if you're not sure how to do that, but you want to speak to me about some questions or anything that you're struggling with, then just send me a message. Or even if you're not sure how to do the chat message, send me an email and I'll do an audio call to you in that Q&A time on either Monday or Tuesday. Okay, if you've got any other questions, please feel free to email me at any time during the week. So your tasks for this week is everything I've set on this tutorial, to read all of Act 4 again with a real heavy focus on Act 4 Scene 1, because that's what all of today's work is on. I'm also going to upload a worksheet which is a set of summary questions on Act 4. I would like you to complete those questions and then send them back to me. I won't kind of mark them in the way that I'll email them back to you, but I'll keep them so I've got an idea of what aspects of Act 4 people might need some extra kind of revision and information about. Okay, have a lovely rest of your week, Year 10, and I will see you or speak to you soon.